Kia ora koutou, and welcome to South Pacific Muscle. Today, our guest was born in central Russia. She came to New Zealand when she was 16 years old with her parents, and for the last 15 years, she's been calling New Zealand home. She's one of us. Prior to being the bodybuilder that you know her and the bikini athlete that you know her as, she was rhythmic gymnastic, and she actually won gold medal at the Pacific Alliance Championships, I believe. So,
yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. So, like, it's really cool to learn something new. Really interesting story about how Katya joined the gym. She joined the gym to support her soon-to-be husband, and he wanted to become a bodybuilder, and so she joined to support him. And 7 years later, we've got a double Olympian, a winner of an Arnold Classic, and someone that's managed a top 10 placing with an 8th in 2017 in the Olympia, which is no mean feat. And for those that don't know, Katya is preparing for this year's Olympia, which has been pushed back to December. So we'll get to have a talk about that later. So welcome on board, Katya. How are you tonight?
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm good, thank you. Excited to talk about bodybuilding, a little bit about myself, I guess, and about the industry. Yeah, so thanks for having me.
Cool. It's been a long time. I don't think I've seen you since 2015, so it's really, really good to see you again and have a chat. Really cool.
Yes, thank you. Still been here.
Yeah.
But 2015 was actually when I got my pro card. Yes, that was the last time that I competed in New Zealand. I've unfortunately missed out last year's bikini pro show. I had an injury and wasn't really ready in time, and I didn't want to, disappoint myself and anyone else.
Yeah.
But that would have been my first time as a pro competitor on my in my homeland. Yeah.
Oh, look, it will happen at some stage. We'll see you on a New Zealand Pro Show stage, which can't wait. Mike, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, welcome on the show. I'm going to go through a little bit of your background and your training and bits and pieces like that. But first of all, Nate and I were having a bit of a chat this afternoon. What do we call female physique athletes who are not bodybuilders? I mean, you are an athlete. You do bikini. I have the same problem with the shape girls in NEBA. Do I call them bodybuilders? Do I call them physique athletes?
I call myself a bodybuilder. Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We're building a body. We compete in bodybuilding. Olympia is bodybuilding. But I've been in situations a few times, and to be quite honest, those 2 times that we have been to Olympia with my husband, everybody always asking, "Oh, hey, mate, when are you competing?" And then he's like, "Oh, it's actually my wife." So people don't really,
I can relate to that.
Yeah, so and even just a few days ago, somebody came to pick up some parts we're selling on Trade Me, and the guy's like, "Oh, so dude, are you competing?" He's like, "Oh no, not anymore, just a little bit. The wife was a superstar in his household." And he just laughed. He thought we were being sarcastic, but we actually said, "Well, actually, no, that's true." So I guess there's a little bit of that we lack the muscle mass, but.
Not short of commitment and not short of effort. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you guys put in as much effort as the rest of us. I just wanted to get the nomenclature right. So you've got a gymnastics background. How do you feel that your gymnastics sort of equipped you both physically and mentally to step out into a competitive bodybuilding career?
It's not just competitive bodybuilding career. It's everything in life. I started gymnastics when I was 6 in Russia, and you probably heard stories. It's very tough in Russia. It's very tough, And then I moved to New Zealand. I started doing it here again. It was very different, very different. Not as tough, not as strict. But to be quite honest, if I had a chance to go through this again, I would have in a heartbeat. It really built a character, strong personality, discipline, and all other qualities that, I can apply everywhere else, whether it's corporate world or bodybuilding or anything else. And to be quite honest, if it wasn't for gymnastics, I don't think I'd ever be in bodybuilding, because that's what really, put the start to it. And that's what made me choose bodybuilding kind of, and stick to it, because it's very sort of similar environment, very similar, skill set you require. So, yeah.
Very structured control, control all the variables.
Mike,
yeah, and to be quite honest, I miss my coach. So there are some days, because I don't have a personal trainer, I don't have a trainer on the ground with me ever. I don't train with anyone. It's just a personal preference. And, there are days when you just don't want to do anything. And that's when I just think about her and how she was just, scream at you and yell at you and call your names and slap you and everything. And you just go and do it all over again and again. And yeah.
Interesting, Mike, how Dennis Milken said the same thing about when he was doing sport in Russia. And,
swimming.
And I don't think a lot of our younger viewers probably have an understanding of just how strong the Eastern Bloc athletic programs are, for the former Eastern Bloc. And, obviously coming from a powerlifting and strongman background, I saw a lot of that stuff, and we used to get their manuscripts and stuff that translated, and they were just leaps and bounds ahead of us in terms of their infrastructure and their training programs and their disciplines. But really, really interesting. So we've got two athletes that have come out of that background, and they've both succeeded,
Oh, it's, would I get my children to do that? Probably not, to Russian school. But in saying that, it has changed. It has changed a lot. It's not as, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's not as, they treat you a little bit more like humans. Because, it's very competitive. Russia is huge. If you don't want to train, if you've got a headache, nobody cares. You can just go home, and they won't force you, because it's also all free of charge. And I remember back when I was, 10, 12 years old, some of our coaches were traveling to countries like Thailand and Egypt to work and train girls there. They would come back and tell us, you don't even realize how lucky you are. They paid big money there. And we didn't believe it until I came to New Zealand, and there was huge money, So it's, but in saying that, I probably think that bodybuilding is harder, if not the hardest sport. Yes, in gymnastics and swimming and a lot of other sports, it's longer hours that you train. We would train, being 10, 12 years old, we would train 6 hours a day, 9 hours a day in school holidays, and it was fine. Wow. And it's a lot of repetitions, obviously, and you do the whole lot of ballet and dancing, and obviously work with apparatus, things like ribbon and balls and hoop. Versus bodybuilding, I train maybe now in the morning, maybe 2 hours at the most, on some days at night. So it's only 3 hours. Yet, that's really what you do outside of the gym that counts. While the food was also strict in gymnastics, you could eat whatever you wanted. As long as you did it all, nobody cares. You can't do this in bodybuilding.
That's kind of a nice segue into, I imagine that we've got mostly bodybuilders watching. So I'm really interested to find out how your training differs or is similar to what physique bodybuilders, male bodybuilders, guys trying to get as big as they possibly can would be. So what does your training program and diet look like in the off season?
Off-season diet is a bit of a yo-yo. I won't lie. That's, to be quite honest, still something. It's getting better in the last 6 years of competing. It still needs a lot of improvement. But I'm quite a person of either all or nothing. And that's what hurts me a lot in the off-season in terms of diet. I just go off rails. Training stays quite sort of similar. Obviously, there's less cardio. There's more, weights that you're working with. So slightly different, but nutrition is lacking usually, But otherwise, my training, once I've built the base, once I've built that sort of the main body parts that bikini, I guess, requires, with, you know, a bit of shoulders, a bit of legs, glutes particularly, then you just start molding onto smaller muscle groups and really fine-tuning things. So for instance, since last year's November, that's when I was last time on stage, I've been really focusing on just growing my quads, just the lower hamstring and my lats, without trying to activate my shoulders or traps or, you know, lower back as much, just because I'm really going for this X-frame and I've got shoulders big enough and they're very responsive. So I went through a period of time where even training legs, I was not trying to use my arms, my shoulders. So sitting on the leg press with my arms up here, just because, you know, you load the weight and you're gonna squeeze the handles. So that's still activating your shoulders. So for me right now, it's really just fine tuning, a little bit of here, a little bit of there. And personally, I don't lift heavy at all. I'm all about mind to muscle connection, time under tension, and that you can't really do with heavy weight. And again, you know, our category is all about the aesthetics. It's about the look. So I do like, for instance, doing group classes. I'd love to do the boxing, but I can't, because that's boxing gonna grow my traps, my shoulders, you know. Group classes, doing all sorts of other random things. One, I'm very competitive, I'd probably injure myself. Two, there's lots of other body parts that activate that I don't necessarily want to grow much more, you know. So it's always, bikini is always about, you know, the balance, the shape, the X-frame, and your proportions. So you have to be very sort of careful with what you do and how you train. So it's not really, and we're not big girls, we're not muscular girls, you know. I still got about 5 kilos to lose until Olympia, and I shrink. People see me and they're like, oh wow, like what happened? So obviously, you know, when people see stage photos, it's under the bright lights, you've got the tan on, you've got pump up, carb up, all those things that make you look a lot bigger. But when you see us in person, you're like, oh, is it all? Are you even a bodybuilder?
It's actually you know? Really amazing. Like even the figure girls, when I was at the Olympia, and I saw them with their jackets on. No, and you see them on stage, and you'd swear they're as big as you know. I think, well, look how big they are, but you know, it's that real illusion. Hey, one of the points you touched on is that it's a lot more about refining your physique and improving those areas that need improvement, while holding back some of the areas you don't want to grow. For someone getting into bikini that dedicated themselves to it, got a good coach or some good advice, and really buried themselves in it, at what point do you think that they would be thinking about just refining their physique? Because I kind of look at it from a bodybuilding perspective, and I hear some of the pros talking about, I'm big enough now, I've just got to refine. And I think, I've been training 30 years and I've never had the luxury of being in that position.
Big enough, yeah.
Yeah. What sort of time frame would you say someone with reasonable genetics that gave it their everything would be?
It's really hard to say. Again, you know, if you look at my first show in 2014, I've already then been just in the actual gym, you know, the fitness gym, only for 6 months. I've already had quite a lot of muscle mass, but that's because I've been doing gymnastics for almost 20 years, you know. So they might not necessarily be the muscles that, you know, the body parts that I needed to have for bikini, but there was already base. And that's why I've always had feedback that I've got a good maturity in my muscles, because it comes from there. Like, for instance, I never trained my calves. Not once. Because I stayed on toes 20 years, you know. So it's very hard to say. And I've got girls coming for posing that I can tell straight away, okay, well, you've done something before, either dancing or some sort of sport, you know, because it always shows. And then even if they haven't done anything, they might have very good genetics, and the body is very responsive, and they build muscle with no issues. And again, we don't need that much muscle mass as, you know, figure or woman's physique and so on, you know. So it's, I'd say 2 years, maybe a year and a half for someone with very sort of standard basic skill set and whatnot, because as long as also you have the right guidance, somebody that lets you know, hey, you need to really work on this, versus just going to the gym, just lifting. I see girls that come and they have, really big, thick waist. You ask them what they do, or I love hitting the weights heavy. And you're like, well, you can't do that really, because you're not a power lifter. If you're a swimmer, all you do is swim, maybe some conditioning classes. Same thing with us. You gotta tailor your training to build that certain look. And unfortunately, it is for the look right now. Nobody cares on stage, whether you squat or, bench press. I don't squat even. I've never squatted. So, yeah. So it's quite difficult to say, but that's probably, I'd say at least a year just to have your feet on the ground, and again, probably depends on the age as well. If we take somebody just fresh out of school, it's generally, very young body, young muscles. So it would be probably quite different to somebody in their 30s,
And so you're saying you've got 5 kilos to lose. Is that about how much over your competition weight you normally get in the off season?
No, no, a bit more, quite a bit more. Okay. Yeah, quite a bit more.
So I wanted to get into pre-competition stuff because bodybuilders, calorie deficit, restrictive diet for anywhere between 12 at the minimum up to sort of 20, 24 weeks. So how long would your pre-competition preparation be, and what would that look like with respect to diet and cardio and calorie deficit?
I usually start about between 12 to 16 weeks. It takes me about 2 weeks to kind of get into the zone, without having a little bit of a bite of this, a bite of that kind of thing. So I try to give myself that time before hitting the 12-week mark. And then once it's on, it's like a switch in my head that's it. I'm in a zone. I don't care if, like yesterday I went to dinner, brought my own food, so it's very normal to me, and I don't care, to be quite honest. Sometimes others actually make more, a bigger deal out of it. I don't get cheat meals because mostly, I have a lot to lose. That's one. Two, even if I could have it, I probably chose not to because I find it harder mentally. I'd rather just stick to it 100% and go with it all the way. And my coach is Kim Order. So he's in America, so we do everything online. And I also have Amanda Forbister, so she's local. So she helps me with just a little bit, the measurements and some bit of a like scientific kind of approach to that. So, and Kim never does sort of dirty cheat meals, dirty carb. It's always, you might have the same food or just more fats, more carbs, still very clean, just steak or salmon. So it's none of the, you wouldn't see anyone on the team eating pancakes or, very few people might have a burger. But otherwise my diet, no, it's very boring. It's very plain. I go hard out. I cut out sweeteners about 2 weeks out. I cut out sodium about 4 or 5 days out. It's just fish and asparagus, and fish is probably just preferred to chicken because chicken is drier. And that obviously depends when I fly out, because ever since I turned pro, as I said, I haven't competed in New Zealand. So it's always been America because that's where it's at, that's where the industry is big. And only just recent years, we've had pro shows coming up in Asia Pacific sort of area. And even then, I'd rather go America than even Russia or Europe because it's a little bit closer. They speak English there. It's, you know your way around. My coach is there, so it's always easy. And for that, I usually cook and get all my food on the plane with me for at least the plane ride in at least another 2 days, just in case something happens, my food doesn't arrive there or something else. I vacuum pack it all. So it's never exciting to sit next to me on a plane when I pull out my fish.
Hey, look, I think that's a real good take-home message for anyone who is wanting to become a serious athlete. the reality is you do have to take meals. You have to prep meals. If you don't prep meals, you're going to fail.
Absolutely.
I went out last night, and at about midnight when I was dropping people home, I was eating mussels and something else. So I just did a quick calorie count and carb count and that, and went, that's it, that's close enough. And, but usually, guys get away with putting kumaras and chicken breasts in their pockets, but I guess the ladies have to do it too.
Yeah, we have to do. Well, I've got a full-time job in a corporate world. So, when I can, I try to sort of shuffle the meetings and customer visits around before or after meal times. But sometimes you've got days full of conference. You got to eat, and there's been times when I've eaten in the toilet. It is what it is, you don't care because, again, I invest so much time and effort and money as well, because every time I fly to America, it's all self-funded, so you can't afford to just, I'm just going to have something here, snack on something, it has to be everything prepared. And normally when I leave home, even though I know I might be going just for an hour, I still take my food just in case, especially in Auckland, there's always traffic, things happen. You don't want to have anything, get on your way. And it's not that difficult, because if you're prepared, you're prepared. And I use meal prep company. Muscle Chow makes all my meals up to what I needed. So some days I just don't even, stick it out of the fridge and need it cold in the car. So you have to do what you got to do. So, and there's no glamour. Whether it's bikini or physique or anything. It's very different to what you see on stage when we have, the makeup and hair done and sparkly bikinis. It's very different. But nobody knows that, you don't shower for 2 days.
I probably wouldn't have even thought that, because I guess, we look at guys and we're pretty bloody grimy, messy, we'll eat while we're driving and there's food packets in the car. But, the bikini girls on stage and they're just immaculate, and you think, they only eat with silver forks and you've got that.
No, eating with hands, cold food out contained or whatever it is, because as I said, sometimes you just don't have the luxury. So, when I come home and ask my husband, can we sit at the dining table, eat food out of plates? He sometimes doesn't really understand why, because sometimes it's a big deal for me as I don't have that luxury, but it's all part of the journey. It's all, hey, you got to be adaptable to whatever things. I've been to, some hotels in America. If it's a host hotel, you'd rather stay there because that's where you get your tanning, the efforts check-in and so on. But some of those hotels are just like standard hotel with no kitchen facilities. Yeah. So I've been there when I cooked my fish in the microwave. That you got to do what you got to do. It cooks just fine, trust me. Even Olympia, there's no microwaves in every room. They don't allow you to bring anything in. There's only one microwave per floor, and you know how many athletes there is. So nobody talks about these things, It's but as I said, you got to be adaptable. You got to find where's the will, there's a way.
Cool. Hey, look, the last thing for me on this section, you said something about cutting out sodium 5 days out. Now, with Shape Class and NABA and with Bikini, I see a lot of coaches carb depleting and loading their athletes, sodium and water depleting them. And I would have thought that it would take fairly low body fat levels for that to really be noticeable. So I thought it was really the local coaches trying to justify the money they're being paid by, a bit of trickery at the end. But I mean, you say you cut your sodium and going to the Olympia, obviously you're at a different level and the body fat levels are different and so on, but could you kind of try and explain A, what you do, and B, what you'd expect local athletes to be doing?
I know for on my team what Kim does. Kim coaches Angelica, Janet, the top Olympians. Not everybody cuts salt. Not everybody does that. I do that. Big reason because of the traveling. If I eat carbs or salt while on a plane, it's gonna bloat you. It's gonna make you retain water, and then you don't have enough time to flush it all out. So that's one of the reasons why I do that. I don't do carb depletion as such. It's just what it is along the way. If it's staying at whatever amount that is 3 weeks out, my diet doesn't usually change much. Peak week doesn't change drastically at all. There might be less water. There have been times when I've had still about 2 liters of water on the day before, nothing usually on the day. There have been times when I've had just half a liter, depending on how you look. And I personally don't carb load either. Carbs don't work well with me. And that's something I've learned, not straight away. I might have more steak, like rather dense kind of meat with a bit more higher fat content, but not carbs. Carbs, I just blow up like a fish with carbs. And if I stress a little bit, that's another thing. Stress, just cortisol rises just like that. 2018 Olympia, I looked fantastic in the morning. Something went wrong with the tan. I was stressed. I came out looking all watery, literally. And you know how it can change within hours. So that's my thing. Sort of stress, cortisol is a very big thing for me. Again, not for everybody. But to be quite honest, again, you don't see anyone doing huge manipulations with sodium and water and carbs. It is, you're right, absolutely right. It is a very much of a New Zealand thing, and I don't know where it comes from, to be quite honest. You do need to be quite low body fat percentage, and even then, you still need to be very careful with how much carbs you get. Majority of coaches in New Zealand are males, and I hope I don't offend anyone. I feel like this idea comes from being a male yourself, having a lot more muscle mass. That's why, you've got open bodybuilding, classic physique guys starting to load 3 days out, 5 days out, because there's a lot of muscles that you need to fill in, that you need to carb up. We don't have that much muscle mass. There's very few bikini girls, I'm sure shape girls that come out that really need to be filled up, that are like very lean and dry. Majority are not. And yet everybody backstage is like on clock. Everybody pulls out rice cakes, peanut butter, Hardy, and off they go. It's the same thing. And then they all come out, of course, spilling over, because that's not what we do, even at Olympia. You don't see us all just eating rice cakes non-stop. Yes, there will be some that needed that, but majority of us, no, it's not like that. So I'm not sure, as I said, where it really comes from.
I think you said exactly what I was thinking, and probably what Mike was thinking, that we don't have, we traditionally haven't had big stocks of bikini athletes with people that specialize in those areas. And you're right, a lot of the guys that were coaches, PTs, etc., have really worked with male athletes. And like you say, we are a different beast, because how much muscle mass we're carrying, how much we need to fill up versus a bikini. So I think that's a really interesting point, and I guess that's probably what makes it critical. If you're going to do a class that's a specialized class, or you're not just sort of waiting to see where you end up, if you know your bikini, then you really need to be talking with someone who is a specialist in bikini, rather than going seeing a meathead like Mus that would, can get you on stage at 100 kilos,
Yeah.
Because it's a different conversation.
Oh, absolutely, it is. And
So I don't think you should worry about offending people. We are here to learn from you today.
Yeah.
Oh, but you know how things go. Somebody definitely would take it the wrong way, and but I've seen it a lot, especially this year, because last few years I've stopped coaching people. I do every now and then a PT session, only on special request kind of thing, and I just focus on posing. I've stopped doing any nutrition or competitive clients ever since I came back to corporate world, and it's been heartbreaking seeing girls that I help with posing, and I never try to get into the conversation, hey, what are you eating? What is your coach doing? You shouldn't be doing this or that, because they come to pose, I do the posing. It's none of my business what it is the coach does, but it's been heartbreaking to see them you know, coming in nicely, everything's going well, and then you see them on stage and like, well, what the hell happened to you? You know, what have you been eating? And there's some crazy stories that girls were eating, you know, a box of donuts the night before when they haven't touched no sugar, no sugary carbs, no gluten in the last 12 weeks. So how can you expect a person to even digest this properly, you know, let alone fill up? So it's, yeah.
Hey, you're talking about posing coaching, and I'm really interested in that. Tell me a bit about how you do that. Is it just like an in-person thing, or do you do it online as well? And what would someone coming to you for the first time for posing coaching expect to get?
A lot. I dive in a lot deeper than just place your hand on the right hip kind of thing. And that's where I think I probably shouldn't sometimes, because I get too invested into it. I do in person ever since we got our house, which is almost 3 years ago now. The first thing we did was install the mirrors in the garage. So because that was always the goal for me, to have clients come in person whenever sort of they want. And there are times when, before New Zealand Nationals, I've had girls come in 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, you know, after the check-ins, just for last sort of final touch-ups. But I do also online as well, if person's not in Auckland, not in New Zealand. I've got some overseas clients as well. And there's a lot that goes into posing. A lot, and that's why I don't do figure posing or other federations posing. While I do know the basics of it, I'm not a specialist in it. I don't know all the tips and tricks. I don't know exactly what the judge is looking for, or, you know, any of that things. And I generally go through with, you know, discussion about the show day, how the show runs, you know, what you do on stage, how to sort of act and all those things before we even get into the posing itself. And then obviously we start working on just a pose, look for another pose, you know, see which one's better. Then we work on putting things together, and then transitions and the walking. I've had girls that could not even walk on high heels, you know, so you need to practice that. You need to learn that before you even get the heels on and start posing. So then there's people with injuries, you know, you got to work around that, you know, trying to get them bend where they can't physically bend. And then obviously, you know, there are people that we all have, you know, one side is more dominant than the other. So sometimes obviously, you know, it can be very visible. So that's another thing we try to hide, you know, or accentuate something, you know, with the posing as well. And I also work a lot on completing the whole look. So that's what color bikini you should choose, what connectors you should go with. Hey, okay, well, you don't have much curves in your body. Let's give you wavy hair, because that's going to give you better shape. So this is just straight hair down, you know, what sort of jewelry goes, you know. So there's quite a lot to it, because, you know, if anything, bikini, you count everything, you know, what sort of bikini it is, what cut it is, how it sits on your body, to, you know, makeup, your hairstyle, your posing, and the overall stage presence, you know. And in the last few weeks is a lot of work on the actual confidence and your sort of self-esteem, because I've had a lot of clients that have an amazing body, but they're just too shy to even present it and show it off. You got to have to show it off, you know, on stage. You got to think like you play a role. You got to get into the character. You know, the way I walk on stage, I don't walk like that in the gym. I'm a complete opposite in the gym. I wear baggy shirts and really like no makeup, no nothing. I come there to work. You know, you probably wouldn't even see me smile, only just because I'm focused. But on stage, it's a different story. So you got to present yourself. You got to make sure that, you know, judges want to see you again. You know, it's a lot of that is the psychological work and mental game, you know. So some sessions I have where we just talk. Where we just get the girls in the zone, because for whatever reasons, whatever things happen perhaps in their lives, that we need to get them into that right mindset, you know, especially, you know, if it's really not the first time competitors. So Yeah, so there's a lot that
What's it?
I do
Cool.
in my posing session.
Cool. Hey, what we'll do is we'll have a look at your Instagram and get a few comments on a couple of photos. Right, here we are. So for those people that aren't following, it looks like most people are following you, Katya. Huge amount of followers there, but really cool. And it's got your bit of your history down there and your sponsors. And you talked about Muscle Chow, but Global Formulas, you're on board with them now. I see a bit of stuff popping up on Insta lately.
Yeah, so I've joined Global Formulas officially about a year now, just a little bit over a year, and couldn't be happier. I've been very resistant to join, and Jacob, he's the owner, been kind of following me and trying to get me on board for almost 2 years. That was since I first met him in 2018 in Columbus, Ohio, when we were there for Arnold Classic. And, my main sort of concern was, or I guess, the thing why I didn't really want to join was because Global Formulas isn't sold in New Zealand or Australia. You can only get it shipped directly from America. And my sort of thing has always been with sponsors, it's got to be a two-way street. You've got to benefit me just like how I can benefit you. And I thought, well, you kind of want to sell your products in New Zealand. How can I, make it worth your while sort of thing? But he was very adamant. He said, still, because he was sending the products just to trial and test first, I wanted to make sure that I, do enjoy the products before joining, and I was still posting about it, and he still managed to get, sales. He could see that, it was coming from me. So he was like, yeah, come on, let's do this. And I did, and they've been amazing. They've been a great support. It's great. It's a great product line. I do use everything from Global Formulas. I wouldn't be sort of recommend all my sponsors. I genuinely believe in the products and the branding. I don't go with the brand just for the sake of it. So I've been with them now just over a year, and this will be my first Olympia working with them at the booth, and I can't wait. I'm super excited because it's my 2019 Olympia. I came to visit, said hello, hang around for a little bit, and it was just that buzz that, they really are like family, very supportive. So I, couldn't wait to do this year, but yet to come. So hopefully this will happen.
I like the fact that, and look, I'd expect nothing less from you because you're meticulous, but you did your due diligence and said, is this the right brand for me? And also, you did, I guess you took on board, can I offer them something, or have I just got my hand out for something? And I like that attitude. It's a really good attitude, and I think it's really important to find a brand that's the right fit for you, because you do see people that sort of hop supplement brands, and you think, how much.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a very loyal person in general. So I've been with Kim Order since 2016, and to be honest, our first show we did together, I placed last. And you know how the call-outs go in the pro shows, everybody gets 16th place. Well, I was the last in the last call-out, so it doesn't get worse than that. I was literally last. That was my first show with him. I stuck around, and the second show I did with him, I won, and that's what qualified me for Olympia. So I guess that's just for, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, just because you didn't work it out with your first time coach, things, might still change, because it takes a while for both of you to learn the ways, to learn how the body works, and everyone's very different. So, yeah, I've been with him since 2016. Glenfit, I've approached Glenfit Bikinis. They make all my bikinis since 2015. I've approached them when they had like 2,000 followers on Instagram. They're based in Australia, and I loved it. And I said, hey, look, I've just turned pro. I want to join the team. And I think I was, if not the first, but one of the first, athletes they've ever sponsored. And I'm still with them. All my bikinis are from them, and it's, an amazing quality. Even though it's, from Australia, I've never get to try it on before it comes to me. Everything's always perfect and tailored to the T. So Claire's very, onto it. And what was that? Muscle Chow. The Muscle Chow, oh, I've been with them as well since 2017. So again, a very long time. Look, the brands work for me. I'm happy with them. Why would I be changing it, you know, for the sake of something? And we're in New Zealand. I've, you know, I think maybe perhaps I have relatively high standards of, you know, of what I want because of what I've achieved in New Zealand, you know. But I'm not, you know, I can afford my own 1 tub of protein a month sort of thing. So when I've had those kind of offers with 50 posts a month and just a tub of protein for free, I was like, well, come on guys, I'm an Olympian, like, you know, I'm not an ambassador, I'm an athlete. Yet for me to get a real good proper sponsorship like I would get based in America is very difficult as well, because, you know, I can't go to the expos unless they fly me there, or if I'm there for a competition already, you know. But otherwise, I can't attend the expos. I can't attend any other sampling stations. There's, you know, very limited what I can do and offer the company. Not everybody wants to do that. So, you know, we found a very good sort of, you know, working formula with Global, and it works amazing, you know, together. So it's been great. So, and I know I can still, you know, work towards the brand as well.
Yeah, I think like social media's kind of made it, you know, more of a global playing field, and the fact that we're stuck down in New Zealand means, you know, that our numbers game in New Zealand and the ability for big sponsorships is a little bit limited. But when you play in a global field, because you've got that influence across the globe because of social media, it does allow athletes at your level to certainly, you know, hold their expectations for something reasonable. So really cool to see you with all that sponsorship. I sort of put this photo up because it gave a bit of a summary, and that's a pretty impressive resume there that you've got on this.
Thank you. I think so often, you know, I don't give myself enough credit for all that I've achieved. It's really been just myself and Sheena Martin that's been really growing the bikini industry world, you know, on the world stage from New Zealand. She's retired last year, and I'm still going. So it's, you know, there's not that many of us that continue competing, not many of us that have the opportunity, I guess, to be able to compete, because once you turn pro, there's really not many options here in Asia Pacific region, you know.
Probably 2 shows a year, if that.
Well, in New Zealand, last year was the first pro bikini show since 5 years ago. They do have a New Zealand Pro-Am usually in March with men's categories, and then there's Ana Classic in Australia, which is invitation only. So you need to have competed before somewhere to earn that invitation. And as I said, now at least there's, you know, there's more shows, well, COVID aside, in Korea and Thailand and Philippines. So that's a little bit more accessible, but otherwise it's only America, and, you know, it's, everything's self-funded. So
I think be a little bit cautious about competing in Korea after what I saw at the last one, where we couldn't even find out who had won and couldn't find any photos, and no one knew how many people were on stage. And so,
and was there a show even at all?
So maybe hold off on Korea until the COVID situation settles itself. But it does make it tough when you've got to fly all the way to America, because it adds significant cost. And as you say, you know, you're funding these things yourself most of the time. So, love that photo though. Just, I think it, to me, and again, I'm certainly no expert, but you know, you've got a real stage presence, and you know, you look at that and you just go, wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think that presentation you talked about, you know, having the right cut bikini, having your hair right, having your makeup right, being able to hold yourself in the positions you need to and know what it looks like from the camera lens perspective, it makes a huge difference. And I think that as guys, we're a bit slack on that. Like, you know, we've got a couple of good guys in New Zealand that pose really well, like Matteo, etc. But generally, guys kind of whip up a routine in 2 or 3 weeks, and you know,
Yeah.
we
And she'll be all right, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know how Kiwis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, at different levels, different things. You know, I've never had a posing coach. You know, it's always been just myself. Yes, Kim looks over it. He gives me some sort of guidelines. Otherwise, I've never had a posing coach. And when I competed first time, it was actually a pro-am show. I remember Mo was like, wow, where's this come from? You know, and I remember I did this kind of he called a U-turn, Katya's U-turn, when I turned around into the back pose and one sort of go without making any steps. He was like, oh, what is this U-turn thing, you know? And yeah, so you got about, that's how he remembered me, and I won that show. I won my first show. Yeah.
I'd say that there's a lot of there'd be a lot of learning in your class in terms of you know, the walk, the poses, etc. The guys one's not so bad. I did hear a story the other day about a guy who turned up for his first show and didn't realise there were quarter turns, so he just kind of turned sideways.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, you know. That's why I talk through, you know, what's expected on the day. You have a prejudge and you have a finals. You've got individual routines. You've got the comparison round. What is a comparison round? You know, it can take a while. That previous photo in the green bikini is from Anna Classic in Australia. We spent 20 minutes on stage, maybe, you know, and the judges could not make a decision, you know, because it's comparison round. So they compare one to another, and we kept on going back and forth. And I remember, you know, I never sweat on stage, which is a good thing, because obviously that means there's much fluid in you. And I remember I could start feeling my tan was running on the back, and I've got blonde hair. So obviously, you know, then you end up with orange hair. And it was just, and you got to do it. You got to work hard for it, you know. As soon as you stop, somebody else will take over, and that's it. You lose your sport. So that's why, you know, I work with clients. Once we pause everything gets sorted, they come in for an hour, pretty much hour non-stop. Your routine, comparison, back and forth. Yes, there's going to be sore backs, there's going to be sore feet, you know, tight calves. But when you're there on the day, you're going to fly through it, you know, because you've done more or less similar to what's expected. This photo here is from Iron Games last year in November. It was Muscle Contest Iron Games. We had 59 bikini pro girls. Wow. A record-breaking number, 59 girls. So just the prejudging took like 2 hours, and lucky they let us not stand on stage. You know, generally you do your routine, you pile off to the diagonal lines on stage. And if you're the first one, because pro shows usually in alphabetical order, if your last name starts with A, you're there for a whole of 59 girls, you know. So lucky we didn't do that, but it took ages. Our first call out, which is usually 5 to 6 people, first call out was 10 girls. 10 girls. We couldn't fit on stage because there's just so many. So, and I placed second in that show. So, you know, a little disappointing.
Yeah, but to get
good.
You know, like in a lineup like that where you're getting 10 in a call out, you know, you really have to work, and you have to be, you know, a notch above everyone else to be noticed because of the numbers game. And I think, you know, the fact that you're getting like a pro level 59 quality physiques on stage, like that means that competition is pretty bloody intense. I mean, like you look at, say, the British Grand Prix, we're probably going to have 10 open men there. The Europa, we had
quite a good number for open.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, like from a amount of work you've got to do on the day, when you generally, they had 20 guys last time. I think it was really about 6 people that were in it really, and that did most of the call outs for those top places. But when you got 59, you know, it's another matter of logistics and time, and I guess
absolutely
not fading is going to be a big factor in that when you've got 2 hours of comparisons.
So it was tough, but again, you know, it's who works here based on the day, and you might have looked amazing in your first. So muscle contest, they usually run. You do the first call out, then they take about 5 girls off stage, and then they continue second, third, fifth call out, and then they bring back the top 3. So I had to come back again and keep working, keep posing. And so that was just prejudging finals. But generally speaking, as you probably know, decisions are made in prejudging.
Yeah.
So only very rarely they might change first, second place, not even third at finals. Generally it is what it is, but you still got to show up your best at finals anyway. So for this Olympia, we have 44 girls. So that's again the biggest class ever in any classes. And it's obviously bikini. I mean, we're all just breaking records.
and they are the best of the best that have qualified. You talk about the level in a pro show, you take the top echelon of that in each pro show and put them on stage at the Olympia. That's going to be a good lineup of 44 girls on stage.
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. We're right behind you. Hey, I've got to ask you something, because I think this would really benefit Mike. How do you hold a smile for more than 5 minutes? Because he can't do it. Grumpy.
Yeah, you just do it, and it's tough because you get so dehydrated and your lips get stuck to your teeth, and then it's actually, so when you do the back pause, when you're not facing the judges, that's when you can, get your lips together and kind of try to unglue it. But again, there's lots of tips and tricks that I know about bikinis. So you can put Vaseline or like Popo oil onto your gums, so it doesn't actually stick, because otherwise if it sticks, it actually hurts, so then you can close and open your mouth properly. So
I'm absolutely, I'm amazed at the depth of your knowledge. Your depth of your knowledge in this topic is absolutely outstanding. I just put this up because you've got a number of photos that you've done, photo shoots that have got some really cool photos, just sort of things that aren't your average sort of gym photo in your bikini sort of thing, and you've got some really neat ones. Have you had the opportunity to work with a number of different photographers around the globe?
Well, not so much around the globe, but definitely in America, Australia, New Zealand. But to be honest, last year when I went in November, I didn't even book any photo shoots. I kind of ran out of ideas. I've ticked all what I wanted to tick in the gym, on the beach, by the pool. I did a glitter bath. I did like a silhouette. And then I thought, well, there's nothing really else, because generally speaking, you pay for the photo shoot. Only rarely, I've had a few only when, if the photographer reaches out to you, then it's considered sort of it's the expenses. Otherwise, yes, you pay for it for that as well. And you again, remember, you got to have your hair, your makeup done, the outfits. So that's just another extra thing to worry about. And as I said, last year I didn't even do it. I am planning to do it this time in Olympia. But again, I'm a bit like, what should I do? Because I've always wanted to do a sunrise shoot in the desert. And that's what I did in 2018 Olympia. So the day after Olympia, we got up at like 5 a.m. We went out to dry lake bed, and it was amazing. It was freezing. I kind of didn't think that it is cold in the desert, So, and you think Vegas is hot. So now we're going in December. It's actually going to be quite cold nights as soon as the sun's down. But photo shoots are fun, but it is quite a work as well. You got to be still posing. You got to be, holding poses and smiling and whatnot. So generally speaking, I don't do those before the show. Before the show, I come to America. No matter how early I get in there, I don't do shopping unless it's food. Don't do exploring. Don't do entertaining. It's a business trip for me. If I can do something after, great, sweet, I'll do that. But beforehand, I don't do any of that. This time around, I have to go because of the COVID. The flights out of New Zealand only go twice a week to Los Angeles. So I have to go about a week early, which is a bit too early for my normal liking. Again, all I'll be doing is sleeping, training, eating. That's it, because my goal is Olympia.
No, there's no quarantine or anything you have to worry about when you get there?
Not when I get there, provided obviously I test negative.
Yeah.
Not when I get there. The fun begins when I land
No.
back in Auckland on the 24th of December and go straight into managed isolation facility for
Merry
Christmas and New Year's.
We'll be thinking of you at Christmas time.
Yeah, so if you want to do the podcast there, we can do many podcasts. We can do Olympia review.
Good idea, definitely. And I just thought I'd put this last one up because we've touched on the Olympia. I really just want to hear, what's your goal for this year's Olympia? What are you thinking?
Very ambitious goal. I need to break into the top 10 again.
Yep.
Very ambitious, but I know if I'm on point, I can do it. And it'll be worth it. There's a lot of sacrifices, there's a lot of investment, physically, mentally, very much so monetary. Like, it's the most expensive trip I've ever made. That's why I'm going on my own. Usually I go with my husband for things like Arnold and Olympia. Will be me on my own. But I'm just being realistic. You know, I've made it once. I know I've made improvements. I know how I'm tracking. If I'm on point, which I know I will be, I can break top 10, you know. So you got to realize, you know, there's a lot of other things involved as well on that level. And to the point of my hair, when I placed 8th in 2017, I was the only blonde in the top 10. Even last year or the year before, there were girls with a lighter hair than brunette, but nowhere near as blonde as mine. So I've had blonde bikini pro girls reaching out to me and saying, wow, you broke through, you know, because generally there's kind of a tendency that judges don't like blonde on stage. But, yeah, so there you go. It's very subjective, you know, just like gymnastics was. Somebody counts your pivot, somebody counts your whatever you're doing on stage, on the carpet, somebody doesn't. Same thing here. I remember my grandmother used to always say, you know, the sports that only have stopwatch are the ones, it is what it is. If it's a minute, it's a minute. You can't do nothing. But gymnastics, figure skating, bodybuilding, you know, somebody might just not like a blue bikini.
Absolutely.
What can you do? You know, so it is a human factor.
Yeah.
So you got to be, and for us coming from New Zealand or even Australia, we have to be 150% on point to break through that sort of, you know, anywhere close to that. You know, we can't afford to be a little bit off, and because we just can't. We're not American.
You know, because
that's the reality.
Because we're not as well known, and look, it's human nature. It's not. There's no favoritism or anything like that. But if you know
just
people,
what it is. It's just
your eyes,
reality,
you know, you'll see them. They get the call out. So, you know, for us when we go over there, I think, you know, we need to leave no choice but for the judges to put us in that call out. So absolutely. Yeah. Hey, look, I have really enjoyed this because I didn't realise how much there was to know. I didn't realise how complicated it was, but I also didn't realise just how much of an expert you really are, because, you know.
Well, thank you.
No, look, it's quite humbling sitting here going, I really don't know as much as I thought I did. So it's a really good thing for me to go, actually, you know, I know these girls work as hard as us, but also they need a knowledge base just as big as our knowledge base. You know, I was probably a little bit blind to that. So thank you very much for making me realise.
And enlightening a little bit.
Yeah, and really cool.
Right? Oh, no, my pleasure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people out there, regardless of what they compete in or what class, particularly those that are going to compete in bikini, will pick up some really good things here and will go, maybe I don't know as much as I think I do, I'm going to go and look for help. And that would be a really cool thing if someone out there goes, actually, I'm going to get a coach it could be the difference between you actually making it and spending a couple of years not kind of going in the right direction, you know. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we wish you all the very best for the Olympia, and our eyes will be on you. So all the very, very best, and really appreciate you coming on. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I really enjoyed it as well, sharing a little bit more about, you know, our non-muscular type bodybuilding. So no, it's been great. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Right, everybody. Thank you very much. We've got lots of interviews this week. We're actually interviewing back-to-back every single day this week. And we'll have lots of different topics from all sorts of different people. So get on our YouTube channel, subscribe. We'll keep you up to date and go from there. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
See ya.